Hey Nerd Faithful, it's Rick from thebigbanglight.com, and I'm here at JordanCon 7 with Martin Powell. Martin is a writer and comic book artist,
right?
And he's produced several comic strips as well as graphic novels. Martin, thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So from what I understand, you do about 7 comic strips a week.
I do.
And what I'd like to know is, goodness gracious, how do you get that done in such a short amount of time?
Well, you do it until it's done, I guess. I don't know. I think it probably. I've been doing this a long time, a couple decades. So I think that what has gone on with me before was a good training ground for this. It's just a question of the comic strips are a nice little exercise anyway, because they're little mini stories. I mean, each has a beginning, middle, and an end to a degree. They usually end on a cliffhanger, but still it's an ending.
Right.
And so I usually know the cliffhanger first, and I just kind of work backwards, and that's the way I work. Usually I can write 2-3 a day. Usually. So,
and it's and you do it through Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated, correct?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated was created by Burroughs himself, who was the creator of Tarzan and John Carter of Mars. He learned early on, he didn't start writing until his mid to late 30s. And he learned probably as he was entering his early 40s that contemporaries at the time that he was writing, that were writing with him were F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway. And he was finding out how much they were getting paid as writers. And then he found out how many copies of books they were selling. And they were getting paid a lot more than him, but their books weren't selling anywhere close to his. Mm-hmm. Tarzan was the biggest selling book, biggest selling books in the world at that time. For about 20 years, Burroughs was the world's biggest selling author. And so he started to slowly realize that, and started making demands of publishers that they wouldn't listen to. And so finally what he ended up doing was finding a publishing house that was in trouble, and he bought it. And he called it Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated, and published the books himself very successfully. Yeah. And the only American author to have done that at that time, Mark Twain tried and failed at it. Burroughs did it successfully. He was a really shrewd businessman. He trademarked the name of Tarzan, so that even though he knew that one day that the books would fall into public domain, but by trademarking the name Tarzan, you still can't do new things with Tarzan without their approval. So it's a company that's still run by his living descendants, and they're very particular about how things are handled. You have a guide sheet showing you what you can and can't do, that's based on, not something I think that Burroughs created himself, but more or less based on his formulas when he was writing. So
right.
It's a lot of fun.
So you work with several artists as well, and from what I understand, if I'm not mistaken, you do a lot of scripting for these artists. So tell me a little bit what goes into that and how you're able to keep up with all that too. It's
a good question. A lot of people ask me about that kind of thing. The best way I could describe it is it's similar to writing a screenplay. When someone is looking at a comic book or a comic strip, everything that's in the panels, that are in the panels, are there because I say they are. So it depends on the writer, but for me they're pretty detailed. I will direct establishing shots and close-ups and bird eye views and worm eye views and all this to the artists. And usually they'll follow me, but they're good storytellers themselves, and sometimes they'll decide to do something different. Almost always when they do, it's better than what I intended, because they're seeing this visually in a way that's different than me, because they're artists, and so they're seeing it in a visual style. But basically that's it. It's you just sort of kind of imagine it in your head, and it's very much like the writer is kind of the writer-director of a film, and then the actor, the artist is kind of the actor, and the art director. So it's kind
of you work on a lot of graphic novels as well, and you've been known to transform some classic literature into graphic novels. And I believe there was a piece recently that you were nominated for the Rona And then Stan Lee had you on his short list this year, which is, that's a huge achievement. So tell me a little bit about like the transforming from classical literature to graphic novels.
Well, the most difficult one I can think of offhand was when I wrote an adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein many years ago, 1989, I believe that's when it was. And the toughest part of it, when I went to actually beginning to dialogue the characters speaking, I was using language that Mary had used in the book. And of course, it's a 200-year-old book. I love the language she used, but I could tell that I thought readers probably wouldn't get a lot of it. So the key, the trick, was to fake it and make it sound old, but it's not. It's a language that I basically invented, and that was a lot of fun. And so, in doing that, it kind of reads like it might have happened 200 years ago, but it's not really. It's me kind of playing along.
So, what are the plans for the future? Do you have any graphic novels coming out soon this year or next year? And how's that experience going for you?
It's going fine. I have a Tarzan book coming out in June from Dark Horse, Jungle Tales of Tarzan. It's an anthology. It's 12 different tales, originally written by Burroughs, that I've translated into the graphic medium. Read all together, they kind of tell one long story, but they're individual pieces. You could start really anywhere in the book if you wanted, but if you start at the beginning, it does tell a progressive story. And each story is drawn by a different artist, which was an idea that I came up with when I first conceived the book. So each story has the artist has their own take on Tarzan and their own style, and it's turned out to be very nice. It's a really good. So I'm looking forward to that. And then in the fall, I have a Robinson Crusoe graphic novel that's coming out that's aimed at like fourth graders, hopefully to introduce them to Robinson Crusoe.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Do you have any recommendations for people that are kind of getting into the comic book industry and wanting to do graphic novels or write their own short comics?
It's very different than it was when I started out. I really actually kind of tumbled into the comics industry almost by mistake. I was trying very hard to be a prose writer at the time, and I ended up sending a very short story, horror story of mine to a friend who was an artist, and unbeknownst to me, she drew it as a comic book story and sent it off, and it got published. It was one of the earliest things I read published. So that made me start thinking, well, maybe I'm focusing on the wrong part of the industry. So I started doing other comic book stories, and they sold too. So, but that was then. Today, it's really difficult for me to suggest things because it's such a different environment now. I think probably the best thing to do, something that I didn't have when I was starting out, there was no internet. And that's an amazing resource. Of course, there's a lot of people doing it, but it's a good place to start, to get your ideas out there, to learn as you go. And if it's interesting and you'd start to develop an audience, that's what you're after to do. There's these Kickstarter plans and things like that if you want to go in that direction too. The comic book industry, if you're wanting to do something like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men, Avengers, that's really tough because that's really tough to get in. I wouldn't say don't pursue them if that's what you want, by all means, but you really kind of need to learn the ropes first, and you need to learn as a writer and an artist what you're doing. Have a little bit of a body of work somewhere else before you approach big companies.
Absolutely. Well, Martin, thank you so much for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to pick your brain, and I hope to see you at LibertyCon, if I'm not mistaken. And do you have any other future cons that you're going to be at?
Let's see, there's the Geek Gathering, which is in Alabama, coming up, and I'm possibly going to DocCon in Arizona, and that's in October.
Okay.
So we're saying I'll be at Wonderfest next week.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and hopefully I'll see you at LibertyCon. All right. We'll see you later, Nerd Faithful.